One set of principles for good security has to do with managing password strength. Some typical failure scenarios include the following. First is the same password is used by everyone. While that may seem difficult to believe in a desktop computing environment, it can be quite common and there can be significant incentive to have everyone use the same password in an embedded system environment. For example, if there are 1,000 valves in a plant and each valve has a password, with maintenance crews rotating and people coming and going, there's tremendous incentive to have the same password on every valve in the plant to make it easy. However, that also means that anyone who knows the password, which is everyone, can do whatever they want. Weak passwords are also an issue, with passwords such as 1234 and 777 being quite common. But on the other hand, if you have a password policy that's too strong, people will simply write the password down on a piece of paper and stick it to the system that the password is needed for. Some possible solutions to the password strength dilemma are to, first of all, have a different password for each person with reasonable strength. That way, if someone leaves, you can disable their account without disabling everyone's account. And if there's a security breach, it's a little easier to find out what happened if you know which person used which password to access the equipment or whose password was stolen. Another possible solution is two-factor authentication. Although in embedded systems, this might not mean using a cell phone, but rather some sort of RFID transponder that has a code that the person has to be carrying when they access a piece of industrial equipment. It's important to have a balance between usability and security. Can you memorize the password 7R#VE9? It's even too long to say. It's unreasonable to expect people to memorize this, let alone have 100 different accounts and have a password that looks like that that's different for all 100 accounts. They're going to find a shortcut, and the shortcut probably will not be in the favor of security unless you make it reasonable for them to use okay passwords with reasonable strength and not make their life crazy. Perhaps surprisingly, in 2017, the National Institute of Standards and Technology issued some guidelines, said some of the common practices for passwords are actually a bad idea because they didn't really improve security that much, and they made it very difficult for people to attain security in practical application. There were some good ideas, such as a long password or using hashes, salt, and other stretching, which we'll get to for storage. Some of the things they said to avoid made sense, but some of them were surprises. Passwords should avoid words in dictionaries. They should avoid requiring weird characters such as symbols and other things because they're difficult for people to type and remember. You should also avoid password hints because it's too easy for people given a hint to guess the password. And in a big change, they said you should not have timed expiration. One of the failure modes of passwords is that if you make people change their passwords every month, it makes it even harder to remember, and they'll pick weak or algorithmically generated passwords that are easy for them to remember, but also easy to guess. In sum, the idea is you want a password that's not easy to look up in a dictionary, but also doesn't have crazy weird symbols, so it can be letters and numbers. No password hints, but encourage people to pick a strong, good password and stick with it for a long period of time. If there's no reason to believe the password has been compromised, then timing out the password and making people memorize yet another password doesn't really help security, but it encourages them to take shortcuts on their passwords. Another interesting guideline is that using cell phone service, short message service for two-factor authentication is actually undermining security because it's relatively easy to hijack phone numbers, at least in some countries. As a result of this, there's a change from using text messages as second-factor authentication to using authentication apps to avoid this issue.